Outlet Liquor is your place to buy a case. Stock up and save when you shop the lowest prices available every day at Outlet Liquor. You never have to wait for a sale. The more you buy, the more you save. Only at Outlet Liquor.
What's your outlet?
Welcome, everybody, to episode 134 of Two Goalies, One Mic. As always, joined by my co-host, Connor Hurley, and special guest today, Steve Linkowski, better known to everybody else as the YouTube sensation, the Urinating Tree. Steve, thanks for hopping on with us, bud. I know it's your second time on, but a different co-host with me this time around.
Definitely. Thank you for having me on again, brother.
But Hurls, it's we missed last week. You were out. I forget what you were doing. Some type of vehicle issue. But how has your week been, bud?
It's been good. Fixed my car issues, and we finally got some hockey news after it feels like a month of nothing. Erik Karlsson got traded, so thankfully we're back and ready to talk about it. Let's do.
We are back, and that's why the biggest reason why I wanted to bring Steve on. Big Pittsburgh fan, Steelers, Penguins. Pirates, we were talking pre-show about it, but I have a lot of questions for you, Steve, and we touched on it a little bit before the show. I'll try to save most of it for today, but does this move the needle for the Pittsburgh Penguins? And if so, how much?
I'm going to be honest, I don't know. And there are a couple things for that. I get why they did it, mostly because Kyle Dubas' marching orders from people above him, go push for another cup. And if you want to make a big move to push for a cup, you bring in the Norris Content Trophy winning defenseman. I mean, can't go much further than that. My issue is, can he stay healthy? This is the first time he's played 82 games last year. That was my main concern about San Jose giving him that huge contract to begin with, because he hadn't been healthy the last two seasons. And then he had issues a couple years before that as well. Then kind of bounced back into form in 22, but got injured again long-term. So that's going to be the concern there. Secondly, I think there's some holes in the Penguins roster. You have an aging forward core. You did bring in a bunch of guys in their 30s, like Lars Eller, Nola Chari, Matt Nieto, Riley Smith. I don't think they're bad signings, but it's just like the team in general. You have the oldest team in hockey.
Yep,
at least from last year. And then you have holes in defense. You have question marks now because Erik Karlsson's not exactly known for his defensive prowess. And do you have the defensive insulation with him and Letang? Because I doubt you're going to have them on the same pairing. So you're going to have probably Marcus Patterson on one, probably Patterson with Karlsson, and then Ryan Graves with Letang. Because Ryan Graves, he's more of a two-way, I would say, than a typical defensive defenseman. So that's the transition you're going to get into there. And mainly, your goaltending is a huge wild card. You did bring back Tristan Jarry. He has a 5-year deal. And then your backup is Alex Nedeljkovic. So Casey DeSmith was involved in that trade. I figured he would be involved because I'm guessing they figured Nedeljkovic would be the 1A, 1B. And they have high upside. But the problem is they don't really tap into that upside all that often. Nedeljkovic had flashes of brilliance in his career. But the problem is there'd be times where he give up 5 goals on 9 shots. That's just how Nedeljkovic works. So that's my concern with the Karlsson trade. The one thing I will say is Kyle Dubas got rid of pretty much nearly every single screw-up that Ron Hextall made in a year's time. Granlund's gone, Ruda's gone, Jeff Petry's gone. I kept forgetting that Petry and Ruda were on the roster. It was that bad.
Yeah.
Because it was just they were just there. Petry is a solid defender. It's just they wanted him to be something else, and then he just wasn't it. Because, he was a guy in his mid-30s. And then, I mean, there are some things that are still there. I mean, Jeff Carter's contract's buyout proof. He's going nowhere.
Yeah.
Brian Rust is a no movement clause. He's going nowhere. But I think the thing is, too, it's that the first round pick they gave up, too, is also protected, which my question is, why did San Jose retain that little cap and take on 3 albatross contracts?
I know. I mean, what was the term left on those deals? That could have been a part of it too. I guess. Like
Penguins are going to be paying $10 million for the next 4 years.
Okay. Whereas San Jose was paying him, what was it, 11 and a half? So
you pay $1.5 million, but I mean, you figured you'd get more in return than Mike Hoffman, who is a bad contract. Jan Ruda, who is a contract you want to get rid of. Mikael Granlund has a bad contract. I mean, I'm surprised the Pens were able to get rid of him without buying him out. And a top 10 protected first-round pick in 24. And if it's top 10, it moves to unprotected in 25.
Okay. Hurls, your thoughts?
My question is, what does the first power play unit look like? Do you take Chris Letang off of it and replace him with Erik Karlsson? Or do you go 2D with Karlsson and Letang? You go Malkin, Gensel, Crosby up front? Or I'm seeing one projection online that has Rickard Rakell up there with Karlsson and Malkin in the back, or Karlsson is the quarterback, and then Letang on power play unit 2. What do you think they're going to do there?
I think they're going to split up Letang and Karlsson, mostly because Evgeny Malkin has always been the point shot, especially on the the right-hand side of the defense. That's where Malkin usually makes his hay, especially with that heavy slap shot. So I don't think Letang and Karlsson are going to be together because I think they both fit that same mold, sort of a power play quarterback style. So
yeah,
I'm thinking partially maybe because of familiarity with Crosby, Malkin, Rakell, and maybe Rust, because Gensel's going to be out for a few months because of an ankle injury. So I think they might still be together. And then Karlsson might be manning a new unit with, Riley Smith you still have as well. So he could probably drop on power play 1. You still have Gensel when he comes back. You still have a couple million in cap space. You could bring in, say, a Patrick Kane or a Tomas Tatar. But I mean, I don't know if you really need them because Gensel will be coming back. You could probably think about getting younger there as well. Then maybe roll. I'm trying to think who would probably be like a shot. I mean, Jeff Carter, you might roll in power play, just have him in the main office space because his main issue is just like a lack of speed. Because as long as he can get in positionally, I think he'll be okay, at least for this next year. We'll see how it goes from there. But I'm trying to think because, you're going to have a lot of fun with this roster. My question is, can it stay healthy?
Well, here's my next suggestion, too, is do you think the Penguins are done?
I don't think so. You had mentioned earlier they have a couple million left in cap space. Jake Gensel's injured. They may think about replacing him.
And here's we talked about, I've tweeted about it. You know, if they really want to make a huge push on this, because let's be good, the Metropolitan Division, in net, it's very, very strong. You have two of the best in the game in Shesterkin and Sorokin. Like, you're not going to score a lot against those two guys. You're just not. So, can you find an answer for that? Could it be Connor Hellebuck? It'd be a 1-year rental. It just would be, because I don't think you're paying him $9 million a year after next season. Unless
you find a way to offset like some salary, because I know Gensel still has to be signed. He has 1 year left on his deal.
Or since they're already the oldest team in the National Hockey League, Patrick Kane. Could you imagine those two power play units
with Patrick Kane? It'd be weird to see Patrick Kane in a Penguins uniform, though.
It'd be so weird.
The only thing that'd be weirder would be seeing Alex Ovechkin ripping howitzers from the left-hand side.
Oh my God! Honestly, I think we all hear the rumors about Patrick Kane. Is he coming home to Buffalo? Could he be? Possibly. Who knows? He ends up going back to Chicago. They're surrounding Bedard with veterans there. That is a possibility. But if Pittsburgh really is taking one last run at this, just imagine Patrick Kane on Sidney Crosby's wing. Like mind blowing, man. One of the I don't even think it's arguable at all. The greatest American-born goal scorer that ever lived on Patrick Kane's wing. I don't care how old they are. That power play unit in short and small ice situations is going to be insane.
as strange as it sounds, Sidney Crosby's always worked best with like guys that aren't exactly the most talented. Like his best wingmates for a long time were Chris Kunitz, really solid two-way forward, wasn't exactly the most skilled, but he knew how to do the little things and get in space. Pascal Dupuis was another one, more of a grinder type, do the little things, get in space. Crosby is more like a grinder on steroids. He's not a traditional top six forward. So my question is, would he mesh with a play like a sniper like a Patrick Kane? Because I feel like Gensel kind of felt that mold, but he's more of a two-way. Kane has question marks in the defensive zone, and I don't know if Crosby plays more of a three-zone game instead of like a pure offensive and neutral.
Your thoughts, Hurls?
I guess getting back to the goaltending for a second, I know there are question marks with Tristan Jarry. Like, what is your confidence level in him? I mean, when you have Nedeljkovic as the backup, you got to imagine he's going to play at least 50, 55 games. I've seen some underlying analytics on Jarry that he's actually an above average starter when you really get into the nitty gritty of it. Obviously, he's had some issues here and there, and obviously Casey DeSmith has been a pretty good backup, and now he's gone. Like, what is your confidence level in him being that bell cow to eventually, hopefully, get this team to an Eastern Conference final and maybe get to a Stanley Cup final after that?
It's not super high. Maybe like a 4 at best for 3 different reasons. One, consistency. As you said, he's shown flashes of sheer brilliance. He can dominate for weeks at a time and then just lay duds. Secondly, he's never performed in the playoffs. I mean, 2021 against the Islanders, games 5 and 6, he just imploded. And that's where the lack of confidence comes from a lot of Pens fans in regards to Jarry. I think with why they signed him long-term, he was the only goalie left. I mean, I think they tried for probably Korpisalo, Freddie Anderson, a few other guys too. I mean, mentioned probably with, Carter Hart, Hellebuck, John Gibson, but the price is going to be too high. They don't have the futures. Mm-hmm. So I think that's going to be a big concern for the Penguins moving forward, potentially.
You mentioned Gibson.
And third is durability. Like, he's been injured for a decent chunk of time.
So you mentioned Gibson. I know he's the hometown kid. Was there a large rallying cry from the Penguins fan base to potentially try to make a move for him? I mean, same type of thing. Like, he, especially with the Ducks these past few years, horrible defensive system. But I think he had a game this past season where he had like 65 saves, can still stand on his head. Obviously, a lot of talent. Was that called for throughout the fan base?
Not really. I know like there were kind of some grumblings, but for the most part, it was just trying to figure out what Dubas was going to do with the roster. I mean, the big decision was, okay, who's going to be in net? Because we thought Jarry was gone. We thought it's like, okay, they're going to let him go.
You're the only one. A lot of people thought Jarry was going to be gone. I think Jarry probably thought he was gone.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised he came back. I was just like, like it was just like it wasn't like a excited like that he's resigned. It's like, it's kind of there because once again, it's the durability, the consistency issues.
Yep.
Plus, it was a relatively larger contract, a 5x5 or a little over $5 million per year, if I remember correctly. But the question is, I know you were mentioning about Connor Hellebuyck for a year. Maybe if they had the futures to do it, and if they didn't sign Jarry long term.
That's true. I mean, would you be in favor of them sending Jarry? I mean, I don't know how much contract you'd have to eat, or if it's even possible. I mean, it's probably a bad look, but in a trade there, sending Jarry to Winnipeg.
I think it would be a bad look. I think it would just give free agents a bad idea. I think like you do a bait and switch on Jarry. Like, why did you sign him? You told every potential free agent that we could screw you over in a couple months. I don't think that's right.
No.
And the Penguins don't work that way.
I mean, as a Sabres fan, I mean, glad they're not in my division because, again, that power play unit's going to be one of the most lethal in the league. I don't care how old they are. But when I look at, again, as we start to kick the show off, it's, how old's Crosby? How old's Malkin? I think Letang's 36. I think Karlsson might be the youngest out of all of them.
Crosby's going to be 36. Malkin, I think, is 37. And then Letang's going to be 36. They were drafted same year, Crosby and Letang.
Yeah.
And then Karlsson, I think, is 32, 33.
I think he's 33.
And he has a lot of mileage, injury concerns, durability. So it might be a little older than 32.
Yeah. I mean, what would the expectation would you say for a full season of Karlsson, just like last year? on this Pittsburgh team, what would your expectations for him be? Would you expect him to match last year? Or, I mean, would you be happy with 80-plus points?
I would say at least a point per game. That's probably what they're looking for, especially from a Karlsson. Yeah. They're looking for from the offensive zone. They're looking for at least 20 goals. They're looking for somebody who's going to be a catalyst and somebody who's going to draw pizzazz and excitement. Because I think partially part of this was to generate buzz in the fan base and to get butts in the seats. Plus, to get back to the playoffs, which, I mean, missing last year was a catastrophic failure. Any way you look at it, especially for a team that brought everyone back, that did everything they could to stretch out contracts, limit the AAV, and, go in on like this last ride and it just falls flat. And I think that's the goal, especially from the higher ups. Like they tell Kyle Dubas, okay, we need you to get us back to the playoffs, go on a deep playoff run. And this is what they promised Crosby, Malkin, and Letang when they brought them back. And they're going to do whatever they can to do it. And unfortunately, we're going to be screwed in 3 years. But knowing how the Penguins are, we are probably going to luck into 2 or 3 generational talents because this is how this rolls in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, and then obviously, we go back to the Metropolitan Division. I mean, having to play those goaltenders as many times you're going to have to this season, where do you see them? I mean, the Rangers don't scare me. Even with Shesterkin, they just don't scare me. They had so much invested in a lot of their youth. Lafreniere has not panned out. Kakko has not panned out. They mortgaged a lot at the deadline to really go for it. Didn't work out. I mean, Keandre Miller's great. Fox is great. Shesterkin, possibly the best goaltender in the league. But they just don't scare me. I mean, the Islanders, they play that, new age Devils defensive style hockey. They don't scare me. I genuinely think the Penguins could win this division.
I think they at least make the playoffs. I would argue New Jersey has a really good chance.
I'm sorry, New Jersey. Yes, I don't know.
New Jersey. I mean, if the Kira Schmid plays the way he did in the playoffs against the Rangers and really came into form, I think they have a really nice goalie tandem with him and Vitek Vanacek. Plus, they brought in a few more pieces. They have Luke Hughes coming into the system as well. And, I mean, let's be honest. I think, their upside is immense, especially if they can keep it up. Yeah. They did get Tyler Toffoli, too.
Throw me in the box. I can't believe I forgot about the Devils when I was...
So
it's all right, man. It's
cool. Even after all of this, the Penguins, just making the playoffs, as a wild card team, would that be a disappointment?
I may be, but I think at the same time, I think they want to get back to the playoffs. So as we've seen over the past couple of years, especially with Florida, all you have to do is make it. You go on it, you find form, you can go far.
For sure.
Yeah, agreed. I don't know. I look at the Penguins, and if they can just get a little bit better in net and adding a guy like Karlsson on that blue line, and I still think, like we said, I don't think Dubas is done. I think he adds one more I don't think it happens in net. I really don't. But I do think he adds one more weapon offensively. I think he has to. And I do think they make the playoffs. I just do. I think it's too much experience, too much talent. If you can't beat them in net, score as much as you possibly can. And I think that's probably the game plan here is I'm not saying you're not gonna keep the puck out of your net more than the other teams in this division, but do everything you can to put the puck in the net. And I mean, Crosby for his age is still gonna get you 80+ points a season. I still think the same about Malkin playing a full season, Karlsson a full season. I mean, I think this team has what it takes to definitely make the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm looking at the free agent list right now. I mean, the only one left that's really a big free agent right now, Patrick Kane, Tomas Tatar, Krejci. If he goes anywhere, it's either Boston or back to the Czech Republic. Yeah. I don't think he's coming to Pittsburgh, especially not with that center depth. Phil Kessel, he's unfortunately on the downswing, and he's more of a top 6 option. It's not what they're really looking for. Taves, I think he's gone. Stalzy, I think he's more a bottom 6 option, and you already have Lars Eller and Noel Acciari, so you're set there. So I think more or less it just depends on if Tomas Tatar is willing to take a $2.5 million prove-it deal and wait for the cap to go up next year.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of players are doing that too. You've seen a lot of it in free agency.
A lot of one-year deal.
So, and And then transitioning out of that, obviously, me and you, we first, met each other. Obviously, I was familiar with your channel beforehand, was because of the rant. Was it 3 years ago now? Sabres have come a long way.
Yes.
Since that phone call. So I definitely want to pick your brain on that. What do you think about the position of this team? Should playoffs be an absolute, I want to say it has to happen, but should everybody be expecting playoffs this season out of the Buffalo Sabres? And are they the most exciting team to watch right now in hockey?
The Sabres are very intriguing. I think they're one of the more interesting and intriguing scenarios in hockey today. You have so much youth coming into the system. You have goaltending that's really coming into its own. You have UPL that could still be something. You have Devon Levi, who has more or less was like a beast in those moments. He really came into his own. He could be your franchise guy. So I think you have that settled. You're trying to fix the back end of your defense, like Eric Johnson and Connor Clifton. They're more there for veteran influence, guys. Help out Matthias Samuelsson, Jacob Bryson, guys like Owen Power, Rasmus Dahlin, and I think Dahlin did get extended long term, if I remember correctly.
No, not yet. We're still
I thought he did. My bad.
I
know they were looking at it.
It was reported by one of the local guys that it was happening on July 1st. And then it hasn't happened yet, and we're sitting here patiently waiting. I'd have to believe it's going to be him and Owen Power both possibly signing on the same day, because I know Kevin Adams has talked extensively about getting him done long term as well, and by long term an 8-year deal. Oh yeah, I mean either that or it's going to be a bridge, and he's going to have to pay the big bucks because you have to keep them both under $10 million, and I mean. Can you do it? Possibly. But with Dahlin, I think you're going to have to go 10 and over just because of how he emerged this past season. And in terms of your forward core, I mean, take your pick. You've got so much in Rochester, too. Yuri Kulich, Isaac Rosen. You have, I think, a few other guys I'm unfortunately forgetting the names of, too. Jack Matthew
Quinn.
Savoy.
Yeah, Matthew Savoy. Mittelstadt is still kind of coming into his own. You have other guys too, but it's just, I mean, you can dream. And that's the first time you could say that about Buffalo in a very long time.
You mentioned Dahlin. I think it's really interesting with the Karlsson discussion, obviously fellow countryman from Sweden, but do you feel Dahlin's ceiling is Erik Karlsson, or could he potentially even surpass that given how young he is and how he already has 5 years in the NHL under his belt? Could he surpass what Erik Karlsson has already done?
I don't know about offensively, but defensively, it seems like he's better in his own zone than Karlsson. So I think at least in that regard, I think he could be a more well-rounded Karlsson. I don't know if he could beat him offensively because Erik Karlsson is generational in terms of his offensive vision, especially on the back end. But in terms of what they are, I think they both have different strengths. And in terms of Karlsson's more offensive heavy in terms of his analytics, Dahlin is a little better defensively. And that can improve over time. Defensively, you can always change up. It's not relying on pure instincts and skill like an offensive game.
Yeah. And obviously, too, is we kind of lost, let's say we lost a year of Dahlin under Ralph Kruger.
We did, though.
I think you lost a lot of years.
We lost a year of Jeff Skinner. We lost a year of Dahlin. We lost a year of the team.
Jeff Skinner on the fourth line after scoring 40 goals. It was great. It was wild. And paying him $9 million to play.
Yeah, I mean, that was looking like a terrible deal at first sight.
Yeah.
That's dear God. You had 18 goals and then you had 9.
Yeah. I don't even think he had 9 that year under Ralph Kruger. I think it was less than that. It was bad. And I remember during one of his Zoom calls, somebody asked Kruger, if he felt happy for Skinner finally, getting a goal. And he made a comment. He goes, well, yeah, I mean, if you're a guy who, values his career off of scoring goals, then sure. He tried turning he tried turning the entire team into something it wasn't, and he took the best qualities of his players and handcuffed them. He neutered Dahlin. He tried to make him something he wasn't. He tried to make him shut down Chris Chelios type defenseman, who's just going to be a defense first type of guy. And that's not what he is.
He's not that player.
He's not that player. Same thing with Jeff Skinner. He tried to make him into a defensively minded hockey player. Sorry, that's not Jeff Skinner.
Jeff Skinner's not a defensively minded hockey player.
No, he never has goals. And I feel like we lost a year of Duane, and get under Granato, a guy who really gets the best out of those qualities of his players. Best case in point is Tage Thompson.
Oh, yeah. He's a unicorn, a pure unicorn. And you at least salvage the Ryan O'Reilly trade, because that was looked at as terrible for a long time. It's like, Tage Thompson, he's struggling. He's going to be in Europe in a couple years. And then suddenly he's scoring goals like there's no tomorrow. It's like, where did this come from?
Right. And again, I said it too, back when he was on the wing. I was just like, you know what, man, he is the perfect size. He's like, if he was a center, like teams would drool over that. I always saw him as a winger. That's what he always played. But I didn't realize, growing up, even in the development program, USNTDB, he was a center, and they were, put him in a situation where he had to play more on the walls rather than not having so much open ice available to him. And moving him to the middle, it was the best thing that ever happened to him. And then Duane, he pretty much took the leash off and said, "Go, kid, just go." And, had it not been for injury, I think he would have been right up there in Norris Trophy voting with Karlsson.
His time will come, especially with how he's been progressing. I think he'll at least get a nomination this year if things go to plan. Oh,
for sure. And I think the one player we definitely need to talk about too, outside of Tage and outside of Duane, Dylan Cousins, man. I'm expecting big things out of him this season.
He's had some good progression as well. That's the thing. Like, there's so much forward depth. You keep forgetting a couple guys here and there because you just have so much in the system that has promise.
Yeah. And
I think, you already have your top 6 centers already secure. You have Thompson, Cousins. You got roll Jack Quinn on the wings along with Victor Olofsson. You could use him as excess goods if things go to plan with Rose and Kulich and maybe Matthew Savoy as well. So there are a lot of different things you can do with this team. And as I said, this is the first time I've seen legitimate hope out of Sabres fans in a very long time. Yep. There was some with when Jack Eichel came in, some when a new coach came in or something like that, when Pagula became the owner, but nothing like this. It's just pure upside. You have a system in place that's finally starting to develop.
Yep.
And you also have a chance to really make a claim for yourself in a brutal Atlantic because it's wide open. Florida's dealing with a lot of injuries. Toronto's going through flux. They might be self-destructing because they had their power play maneuver with Brendan Shanahan. Yeah, Boston, they're on the downswing. They're coming off a brutal playoff loss. Bergeron's retiring. Tampa Bay could be going on the downswing. And you don't know what's going to happen with Ottawa, Detroit, and Montreal. They're still in flux as well. So this could be your time.
The Yzer plan hasn't really worked up until this point, that's for sure.
It's a mixed bag. They're a bunch of weird moves. You're throwing money at Justin Hull and Ben Sherratt.
Yeah.
But you make a great move for buy low candidate and Alex DeBrincat. So it's weird.
Yep. It's definitely not. It's not working out as well as it did in Tampa. That's for sure.
Well, Tampa also had a great development system, a good owner, and scouting staff as well.
Yep. And Casey Middlestat, who you mentioned his name earlier, he's a guy that this time last year we all wanted gone in Buffalo. And again, a full season of health. He put on size, which was always my biggest issue with him. Is I've always felt that he just wasn't, he wasn't putting the work in the off season to be stronger on the puck and stay healthy. Because one thing plays into the other, right? You need to be strong on the puck out there. You be strong, a strong bodied player out there in order to stay healthy. And he's always injured. And this season, I think we got close to a 60-point year out of him. And I will expect more out of him next season. And he looks like he's in the long-term plans for Buffalo. And then Devin Levi, we haven't even really touched on him yet. The amount of expectation and pressure I think the fan base is going to put on that kid is going to be immense. But in the most important stretch of hockey the Sabres played last season, he got 6 starts in a row. And
he was looking really good too.
Yes. So, Hurls, your thoughts, bud?
So I was going to say the biggest question obviously is goaltending. Similar to the Penguins, same as the Sabres. We've talked a lot on this podcast before about what our expectation for Levi is. Like, how many games do you think we should reasonably expect him to start? I'm more closer to the 40 range, especially given that it's his first year. You have UPL and Comrie. Who knows how they're going to split that up? You obviously don't want to carry 3 goalies again. Should we feel comfortable with the combination of Devin Levi and UPL? Obviously, 2 young guys. UPL's been very inconsistent, but he's also shown flashes that made him such a touted prospect. Like, it's a very unconvincing goalie situation at this point, given that you haven't seen too much from these young guys. Like, how should we feel about that going into this?
It's very high risk, high reward. I mean, you have the upside, former first-round pick in UPL. Not first-round pick, but top prospect in UPL. And then you also have Devon Levi, who came into his own. I mean, limited game experience is going to be an issue. I know you do have Eric Comrie, but he's more cup of coffee, journeyman type. Craig Anderson was, great story, but unfortunately 41. It's the end of his rope, unfortunately. But in terms of what they could be, they've shown flashes. Levi had a really great stretch, especially in March when he came into the league. UPL, I mean, he's still developing on his own right. And I feel like you could still go maybe 50 for Levi and then 30 or like maybe 25, 30 for UPL, depending on how they play. I feel like you just play the hot hand. I think that's the best way to deal with that situation.
I put him probably around 50 or more. I think that they showed last year with him that they have a ton of faith in him. I mean, and the thing with that, up until that point, I think you only saw maybe a small handful of times in the season where you saw the same goalie start 2 or 3 games in a row. It just never happened. There was just a constant carousel, which I also attribute that to the UPL struggles, because it's like I think me and Hurls both have agreed on this podcast before that a lot of his issues are up here. It's not an athletic thing. The kid is crazy athletic. The skill is there. He has shown it. It's just up here. And any goalie knows that when you're not consistently in that starter's net, it's tough because you deal with the pressures. You have a 41-year-old Anderson, a guy who is there to be a guy, but at the same time, he was getting a ton of starts too. He was getting called upon in important games. And you have Eric Comrie in there. Granted, he was hurt a lot last season, but he's in the rotation too. So you're in a 3-goalie rotation for most of the season, and then add Devin Levi. Now you're in a 4-goalie rotation, and it's like, I get it. As a goalie, it's tough to be in that type of a situation and not consistently getting the shots in practice that you want, in warm-ups that you want, and obviously getting the consistency as a starter as you want. So I think that not dumbing this down, but getting this down just to 2 goaltenders as being your 1A, 1B, it will help UPL in the long run. I don't foresee him as a long-term answer. I think that, granted, maybe even after this contract, maybe he gets an opportunity somewhere else. But I think this year you're going to see a much better, more consistent UPL. But I think if I'm Kevin Adams, or not Kevin Adams, if I'm Don Granato, I'm putting Devin Levi out there for probably around 50 games.
That sounds about fair, especially for a young goalie. You don't want to burn him out because he's not at the load of, like, say, Marc-Andre Fleury in his prime or a Hellebuck where you're throwing him 65, 70 games. Like, go. Just go.
I think those days are almost over with, too.
Pretty much. I think they realize that they're going to burn goalies out if you play them that much.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Fleury, I see a lot of Fleury and Devin Levi, a young Marc-Andre Fleury in terms of the athleticism, in terms of the height. Given how much I don't know how much you've watched of Levi, but from what you've seen, do you see that comparison at all? And what do you think he could be as an NHL goalie? Because a guy his size isn't really considered that often anymore. 6 foot, like maybe even a little bit under. Obviously, UC Saros is the example that you see now of a guy who's in that upper echelon of goalies for being a little bit shorter. Like, do you see those Marc-Andre Fleury comparisons? What do you think he could be in the NHL as he continues to develop?
I haven't seen enough of Devon Levi to really get that sort of comparison, unfortunately, but I think his upside is franchise caliber goalie. If he becomes UC Saros, you're jumping for joy. You have a Vezina nominee right there. Absolutely. And the fact that UC Saros wasn't nominated for a Vezina last year is a travesty, but that's at least to me. I would say, you said it right there. I think like more of your upside is Yusei Saros, especially with that size.
For sure.
Agreed. And in terms of the Vezina vote, I mean, there was a good handful of goalies out there that, I mean, how does Olmark not win it? Like with the season he had. You have Shesterkin, you have Sorokin, Vasilevsky's always in the conversation. And then obviously again, UC Saros had a phenomenal year too. It's hard to pick a top three there out of those goaltenders. But Steve, I mean, outside of that, I mean, did you wear the Kansas City Chiefs shirt intentionally to piss us off?
No, actually, I did not. I just wore it just in case. I totally did not think that through. Well, I was at the gym last night. I had a spare shirt.
I was wondering, you said he was a Steelers fan.
Don't worry, I was. This is a Boulevard Brewing shirt. Okay,
I just thought
I've had it for a couple years.
In Kansas City, I'm like, is this guy being a dick right now?
No. I totally didn't put two and two together.
No. What do you think about our Bills this year, huh?
The question is, like last year, it kind of felt like you were going sideways. I mean, you brought in Von Miller. Wasn't super crazy about it, but the fact that you lost him, even though you brought him in for the playoff push, that hurt. Yeah. Struggling against Miami and Tristan Thompson, it felt like Skylar Thompson. But that felt like question mark, and then Cincinnati just felt like a punch in the gut.
Yeah.
And now I would say the question is, you have to ask some hard questions. Like, is the style you play going to be suitable? Because you're mostly relying on Josh Allen. You need a running game besides Josh Allen. And if you don't, I don't know how you get past the Kansas Cities of the world.
I think the guy who's probably going to be under the most pressure outside of the coach is definitely the offensive coordinator, because there's no questioning. You can look at points scored all you want. I think in terms of, again, when you back style of offense, I think the offense absolutely took a step back last year.
Yeah. So that's the question. I mean, Dorsey, everyone remembers him for just like slamming everything down on that final play.
Yep.
But at the same time, as I said, it felt like you were going sideways last year instead of up.
I say, if you play fantasy football, draft Dalton Kincaid.
Dalton Kincaid, safety valve. Oh, yeah.
You're probably going to be able to get him in the 12th round, maybe even later. A lot of guys don't know about him, but everything I've heard out of camp, they're going to tailor the offense around him. 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets. He seems like he's going to be a slot guy, probably a starting slot receiver, even though he's a tight end. It seems like he's going to hopefully the reason they moved up to draft him in the first round is for that. So as good as he's been in camp and as much as he's shown he's belonged, it seems like he's definitely a sleeper to look at. So
I can't wait to see him do his work 10 yards and into the end zone, man. That's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Fun to watch.
Maybe Kelsey is what we call him.
How about your Steelers, bud?
The question is, I feel like you could go a lot of different ways here. It depends more or less on Kenny Pickett's development. And I've heard mixed things about him in camp. Like sometimes some people are saying he's having strides, some are having struggles. I saw a lot of him out of Pitt. So I saw like in that final year of play, his first 3 years, he was very uninspired, nothing crazy. Senior year, something just clicked. And that's why I was ecstatic to draft him, because I feel like he could be something interesting in this league. And if you notice, like in the second half of his season, everyone keeps rambling on about his touchdown to interception ratio and the early picks. He limited his turnovers at the end of the season. I think more of that has to do with Matt Canada's offense. He had a lot of poise, confidence, game-winning drives. That Cleveland game, he showed something that, like, okay, maybe he's starting to get the NFL game. I think he's at least reached his floor of being like an Alex Smith, a Ryan Tannehill type. Somebody who manages the game, doesn't do anything stupid. Do I think he could be elite? I hope so. I mean, that'd be best case scenario, but he'll have to make that jump in order to get best case scenario. And to me, best case scenario, I think they could win the division. If Pickett makes his developments, offensive line comes into its own, everyone stays healthy, I think that could be the case. But, I mean, realistically, probably 9-10 wins, maybe a wild card spot. That would be my best bet.
I can see it. I can definitely see it. But Steve, thanks always for coming on with us, man.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Hopefully we can have you on again sometime during the season.
Definitely.
When we have like a better idea of how these teams are starting to look. And I'm excited to see your Penguins, man. I really am. I've always been a fan of Crosby and Malkin, and to add a guy like Erik Karlsson to that mix just makes it a little bit more exciting. And it'll be fun to see if they can really take one last stab at this.
As I said, I never in my wildest dreams expected Erik Karlsson on the Penguins. Because
Yeah.
I'm just sitting there like, wow, really? We got Erik Karlsson? Like, I love me some Erik Karlsson. I don't know how he's going to fit. That's the question.
Well, he'll definitely fit in on that power play. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, Hurls, you got any final thoughts?
I guess one more question I had as we were talking about the expectations for both teams. Like, I think a wild card spot for the Sabres is what we're all hoping for, maybe even second or third in the division at best. And you said yourself, maybe not third in the Atlanta in the Metro, but potentially a wild card spot.
Yeah.
What would a Sabres Penguins playoff series look like? Number one, how entertaining, but number two, like, how do you think that reasonably could go if that matchup happens this upcoming playoffs?
My thing with the Sabres is this could be the learning experience year. My reference point is the 07 Penguins, when they were the first time they were in the playoffs, like first year Malkin, second year Crosby, Jordan Stahl was a first year player as well. You had a bunch of younger players. Chris Letang was in his first year. So you had a bunch of different guys that were really getting their first taste of the playoffs. And they ran into a veteran Ottawa Senators team. I lost in 5. So I think that might be the thing, but that's just the sort of thing that a young team needs to grow. And that's nothing against the Sabres. I think it's just how a team needs to really experience playoff hockey. That's at least how I see it.
Those Ottawa Senators teams were so good too, man. Healy, Alfredson, and Spezza in their primes. Like,
yes.
I mean, people talk about Spezza, Healy. Dude, Alfredson was such a big-time Sabres killer.
He was a beast.
Like,
Chris Phillips. I mean, they had Patrick Lalime, Ray Emery in that lineup. Like, they had some guns.
People forget Hasek was on that team, too.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember – I'll always remember the 05-06 year as the cup that should have been in Buffalo, but then we ran into Ottawa in the next year in the playoffs, and we lost them, I think, in 5 games. And then, it was tough. But again, Steve, thanks for hopping on with us, man. Anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
Oh, man, I'm on YouTube on Urinating Tree, urinating_tree on Instagram, and Urinating Tree on Twitter. So I'm looking to do sports ball starting in September for the NFL season.
Awesome, man. And I definitely go check him out. His videos are absolutely fantastic. I'm subscribed as well. So thanks again, Steve. Guys, it's been episode 134 of Two Goalies, One Mic, brought to you by Outlet Liquor, the place to buy a case over on Georgia and Boulevard. When you go in, tell them the boys from Two Goalies, One Mic sent you. They'll take care of you. I am Duane for Hurls. We'll talk to you next week.
What's up?